All right. Welcome, everyone. I believe we're live. John, are we live?
I believe we're live.
Excellent. We're going to give everyone just about 30 more seconds, maybe a minute for folks to continue gathering. Thank you all for showing up this morning or this evening. Pretty excited about what we have to share with you today. This is our kind of second webinar that John and I have done together. So we learned a few lessons. We're going to do a quick, about a 2 to 3 minute overview of what Wheelhouse is, some of the new functionality that's been built before we dive into some revenue management best practices. But yeah, at the end of this, we're going to ask you all for feedback. There will be time for questions. We have teammates also on the video chat. So if you have questions during the presentation, they'll either try to answer them. We'll potentially give you an email for a follow-up if it's a question that around your portfolio or whatever it may be. But do feel free to send us messages during the chat. We're always eager to hear your thoughts. We can always slow down or double click on things. So with that, it's a minute and a half after the hour. I'm going to start with a quick intro here. John DeRelay and I will be presenting on how to respond to the pending recovery. Right, we've already seen markets start to bounce back. And again, that's going to be the meat of the presentation today. But first, for folks who are new to Wheelhouse, what is Wheelhouse? Wheelhouse is a software platform to enable revenue management. We also added market reports back in December, and we have a new benchmarking/comp set tool coming live as we speak. Everything we see today, hopefully what you'll agree with, is Wheelhouse is really easy to set up, customize, and automate. Those are all really actually important components of properly recovering from the pandemic. So customizing, editing, et cetera, those are things we pride ourselves on and hopefully being easy to do. And everything we do at Wheelhouse, whether it's the market reports, the comp sets, the pricing engine, is predicated on a pricing engine we've been working on for 6.5 years now. Probably the most A/B tested pricing engine in the space. We'll talk more about that as we go. But it is a living pricing engine. That means we add about 10 billion new data points daily. We're constantly analyzing your market, each property, et cetera, trying to learn more. The flagship product, our dynamic pricing engine, this again has been under development for a long time. In 2020, we helped the average listing increase revenue by 22.6%. Yes, top listings did earn 100% more. I know that doesn't sound believable, so I always include a customer quote. We'll get that in a second. And you can customize everything about your calendar, right? You can customize individual days or any other aspect of your pricing strategy, from how we price your weekends to how we price seasons, et cetera. And for folks who have been on the Wheelhouse platform, you know that we have these new market reports. They allow you to look at any market. We're in, 2,000 plus markets now, 60 plus countries. So every market we're in, these are free right now. They allow you to go in and look at how your market is recovering. We're going to dive more into these later today, so I'll keep moving, but they allow you to look at historic data, and more importantly, in 2021, they allow you to look at future data and what's starting to emerge in your market. This is a sneak peek of our new comp set benchmarking tool. It will be the best way to see how people near you are performing. So you'll be able to look at any month, see how you rank. You can customize your comp sets in a bunch of ways. You can add up to 100 listings. You can make up to 3 different comp sets. So this is another tool, our newest tool. We're super excited about it. And the data in it is exportable. So you can do all these kind of cool things. And lastly, to end with a quote, yes, this is a customer who said, Wheelhouse truly helped me double my income. This is pretty cool technology. John's going to show you more about how to maximize revenue in the coming year. And with that, John, that's all I got. That's a quick intro of Wheelhouse. Are you ready to take it away?
Absolutely. All right, let me share my screen here. Make sure everyone can see it. First of all, thanks everyone for coming. I know I saw in the chat that people are here from all over the world, so appreciate your time today, whether that's in the morning, in the middle of the night, in the middle of the day, whenever. We're glad you're here. Andrew, you guys can see my screen? It's
we can,
working?
Yes.
All right,
yes.
Good. So today we're going to talk about responding rapidly to the recovery. We know that COVID has had a big effect on our industry, and we want to help people in the industry position themselves to be able to take advantage of this kind of volatile time that we're in. So what we're going to kind of talk about today is the foundations of rapid response. Rapid response is something that is kind of fundamental to revenue management in general. It's not just a COVID thing, but it's going to be super important to COVID. And if you can build the skills and the habits of rapid response now, you're going to be able to carry that forward into periods of high growth and stabilization and maturity that are going to follow. So the first thing, it's kind of like a cycle. You'll hear this from us a lot if you come to multiple of our webinars. Check your assumptions. You got to have assumptions, and then you want to check them.
Quick timeout, John. Quick timeout. Give everyone a little bit about you. Why should everyone lean in and pay attention to you today?
Oh, that makes sense. So the reason why the experience I'm drawing off that we're doing this today is I led the Stay Alfred revenue management team pretty much throughout the life of the company. I started in sales when Stay Alfred was just an 8-person kind of garage shop. We had an office, but it was kind of a goofy place. And I led the sales team and then the revenue management team all the way until the end of that company. So we learned a lot at Stay Alfred. I think that us, among some of the other companies at the time and everyone else involved, we've been part of this great collaborative industry. And I wanted to take some of the things that we've been learning, or that we learned at Stay Alfred and that we worked with other people on, and see if I can help everyone in the industry who's coming out of COVID, and also the newcomers that are going to be coming in. So.
Yeah. And then after Stay Alfred, did you manage some other portfolios in the space? Maybe you could share a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So after Stay Alfred, I worked as a consultant for quite a while. As a revenue management consultant, I did a number of things, but particularly I continued to directly manage portfolios, and had an opportunity to really use Wheelhouse directly through a couple clients with different portfolios in different cities. I really found that not only did I have a high level of trust for the pricing algorithm, I was working in markets that I had a lot of personal experience in, and the algorithm was really producing something that I understood that matched a number of the assumptions I had, even with COVID. And I got an opportunity to use the tool and found it to be really, really excellent.
Yeah. So I've the other context I'll quickly add, I actually learned things from John about Wheelhouse. The way John uses the tool is really creative. I think he's going to show you how to use the free aspects of the tool to drive your portfolio today. I was so impressed with John after the last webinar that we made him an offer to join Wheelhouse. We'll talk more about that, but we did want to acknowledge that. But super creative revenue manager, able to look at any market, tear it apart, and someone now that you can, if you're listening and you want some help and you want to talk to John after this, someone who can definitely help you out now. So John, with that, back to you, to the foundations of responding rapidly.
Awesome. Yeah, got so excited to jump in, forgot, to introduce myself.
It happens.
And if we're speaking too fast, just feel free to leave us some questions in the chat, and we'll take a look at those. So these foundations of rapid response kind of exist in a cycle. You got to make some assumptions about what you think is going on. There's kind of a sea of data. You can only handle so much. But we all know that you approach things from heuristics. And if you can have an idea of what you think is going to go on, you can check to see if that's right against market data and against your portfolio. So make some assumptions and then check them. Then you want to develop a strategy or a plan. So we'll show you a little bit how to do this. This is a little bit of a softer thing, but you want to have an idea of what you think is going to happen and what you are going to do to reach the outcomes you want to have. And you want that plan to be able to be built in a way that when you sit down to do revenue management, however often that is, once a month, once a week, once a day, you already have a direction that you're going to go, and that plan should be providing that. Then the last part is you're going to react and interact. You're going to look at your bookings and your sales and your portfolio, and you're going to make decisions about either making adjustments, experimenting with your price position, or balancing your inventory. So as you do that, you're going to use your plan as reference, and then you're going to react to what's going on in the environment, and then you're going to go back, constantly check your assumptions, review what's going on in the market, see if what's going on in your portfolio is really matching what you think is going on, and you can keep kind of going through the cycle to fine-tune your revenue strategy. So what we're going to talk about today, pretty simple. The first one is I'm going to show you how you can use the market reports in Wheelhouse to start to draw some assumptions about what's going on in the market. We're going to give you an example of a guideline-based strategy that would allow you to both articulate what you're trying to do and give you an idea of how to approach your portfolio when you're actually doing revenue management. And then the third part is we're going to show you what you can do to do those interactions and reactions in your portfolio. So it should be pretty great. I'm really excited to have you guys here, and I hope you enjoy it. So step one, check our assumptions. What I wanted to show you here, first of all, is what we call the tale of two markets. The first thing to understand, particularly about COVID, is that one, markets are not necessarily, well, they're definitely not performing according to historicals. And two, the markets are actually acting very, very differently. And so we might assume at a top level that, hey, COVID happened, all the markets are down, they're still down, who knows when they'll come back. But when you start digging into your individual markets, you'll find that there's very different stories. So what I have here is from the market trend report, we're looking at RevPAR at a monthly level year over year in these two markets. We have Savannah on the left and Nashville on the right. In Savannah, what's interesting is in 2020, we saw a dip in March and April, which is not very surprising. But what happened was that market recovered very, very rapidly, like while we were in the middle of COVID, and actually started performing better year over year all the way through the end of the year, and has only now in Q1 started to slow down a little bit. That's a very contradictory trend to what we might just assume, right? Very unusual. We might think about some reasons for that. That's part of building your own assumptions, is maybe, you know, it's a southern market, a lot of small hotels and a lot of vacation rental products. So maybe people with pent-up demand were heading there. They weren't subject to restrictions. So, you know, you come up with those ideas of why. What's interesting to note is that the seasonality in this market has actually shifted. What was otherwise considered a shoulder season or like a semi-off season actually started performing what was previously similar to a high season. Now we look at another market on the right side, and we have Nashville. Nashville in the spring took a pretty big hit. And it started to recover a little bit in the summer, but still never really reached its previous year-over-year values. Kind of plateaued through the fall and still wasn't reaching its year-over-year values. And then
Bars, what am I looking at here when you're giving us this analysis?
Oh, sure. So I'm looking at this at a really top level. This is RevPAR. For the entire month in the entire market. So at a really high level, I'm just trying to draw some assumptions. Each one of these bars is one of the years. So this green bar is 2021, and this kind of light pink bar is 2020. So I'm just kind of drawing an idea of the trend. I can do this pretty fast because I've been doing this for a long time. It gets faster. The more you do it, the more easily you'll just recognize shapes in the data. So if you're not quite recognizing what I'm talking about now, that's okay. Once you start going into stuff, you're happy to contact us and ask us some questions, but you'll start to develop that ability to just recognize those shapes. So what I can see here is this 2020 bar is just not really ever hitting that 2019 bar. It's not recovered until we get into the lowest season of the year. And even then, now it's only kind of in 2021, still not quite hitting there, but drawing up a little, so maybe slowly recovering. What is interesting is April is almost as strong as March, and we haven't done April yet, which means that would indicate to me that the recovery is accelerating. Now, what we don't know is how quickly it's going to recover, because it's clearly not recovered yet. So as you can see, at the market level, there's a lot of different things going on, and it's worth taking some time to build some assumptions about what you think is going on in the market, because that's going to inform how you act when you price. So let's go into the market reports and take a little bit deeper dive into Nashville. I want to show you a couple of the reports that I look at, and I think that'll help you out to give you some idea of where you might be able to look when you look at your market. And just a reminder, currently these are available for free. So if you go on to Wheelhouse and sign up, I recommend you link your account so you can also see some of the things that are going on specific to your listings. But if you do sign up for an account, you can access these market reports right now. Do you know how long that'll be, Andrew? Awesome.
I mean, we kind of are making some products free right now just because we recognize the market is recovering and it's important to be sharing this data. So We don't have a definitive timeline on that yet.
Okay.
But it's free now. It's free today.
So the first thing you'll see here when if I go up here to the market intel, I've got Nashville already selected. This is the overview page. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. There is something important that you want to look at. It's the number of listings. So I'm going to keep this at a really high level because I'm just trying to draw assumptions. I tend to focus on my own portfolio primarily, but you can absolutely filter this down in various ways. Just keep in mind, you are adjusting how many properties are going to be in your data set. So that's just something, good data practice to keep in mind. There may only be, a few 6 bedrooms. So, sometimes it's better to aggregate a little bit more data. We're going to look at high level trends. So I'm just going to use the entire market for right now. So what I was showing you before is under the trend section, and it was RevPAR. So you can see we have a RevPAR trend. What I really want to show you, though, is a couple of the more advanced things that you can look at. The first one is if we go to the historical tab up here on the right, and if we come down to historical nightly rate, this is going to be the ADR that was booked at a daily level in the past. And I'm just going to try to look for the different average daily rate, so the rate that was sold.
And what's RevPAR?
RevPAR is it's the revenue divided by the total number of days in the month. So it's kind of like an adjusted metric to tell you how much you made per day, including the nights that weren't sold.
Great, thank you.
So ADR just tells you the nights that were sold, and RevPAR tells you the average of your revenue across every day in the time period.
Great, thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to just adjust this so we're really looking back at December. I need to look at just kind of recent trends because things are changing so much. And we also have to keep in mind seasonality changes a little bit here too. We saw that in the RevPAR thing where it was kind of stable and then it dipped in December and January. That's generally for most markets, not all markets though, a low season for travel. So what we can see here is in this nightly rate, I'm just kind of looking at the trend. Obviously to me, it seems like weekends and weekdays have a pretty big difference. That's important to note when we're doing our pricing strategy because there's a pretty big difference. We have a pretty big range of prices. At the top of this, is like 330, but the median is around 187. And it's kind of slowly crawling up. You guys can see that on the trend. If I look at my year over year, you can see that there's not a huge difference. This will start to be less relevant because that March situation, we won't see it, but it just gives you an idea of a snapshot of like how people are pricing or actualizing price compared to where they were historically. But we got to draw some trends. So if we look at this, we can see it's kind of crawling up and we're kind of in that, just under 200 range. Now, what I want to compare that to is on the future tab. If I look at the future tab, I'm going to look at asking rate. So what this is going to show me is the future dates, and it's going to give me an idea of what the posted rate is in the marketplace. That's a little bit different. So in the past, we're looking at what rates have actually been sold. In the future, we're looking at what people are pricing. And what we see here is something that's kind of interesting. The first thing is trend is pretty similar. We've got that weekday trend. It's not actually growing that much, but if we just look at these next couple weeks, which are pretty close, that median asking rate is substantially higher than our median actualized rate. This is under $200, and this median is almost $250 going forward. And if we look at the year over years, asking rate's a little bit harder one to look at in the future because you need to understand what time it is. My hunch here is that people are probably pricing really similar to what they would have understood the historical market to be, but people aren't necessarily actualizing that rate. So there's another kind of way to look at this. If we look at on the future tab, we can look at the distribution breakdown this is more of a good snapshot, but you can just get an idea of how things are going. So if we assume that the market is recovering, it's recovering slowly, and we know that people have been selling a rate around $200, if I look forward into April, I want to look at, what percentage of the pricing is, around under $200. So if I go over here, 51%. So that means half of people are kind of under that weekend rate that we're seeing actualized. Half of people are pricing over it in April. And that doesn't even take into account the fact that we know that there's a ton of weekdays that have way lower prices, and there's more weekdays than weekends, which means very few people are actually pricing where the market is landing in the future. So what that indicates to me is it's giving me it's helping me mold an idea of what price position I might need to be in. Now, you can take that and apply that to your specific products. You can look at comps to decide that, but it's just giving me a general idea. My general assumption around this is that a large portion of the market is priced too high. Rates are probably either getting eroded very shortly in the short term, or only people at the lower end are purchasing. But it is recovering. So there is a point in which this rate is going to keep growing through time. Additionally, I know about the seasonality. I can see that in those like RevPAR things. Summer tends to kind of plateau out, but there's a question. Will summer start to act a little bit like Savannah as restrictions get pulled back? Will these shoulder seasons in really hot markets become high seasons because there's so much pent-up demand? We don't know the answer to that, but that's something that we can think about when we're actually building a revenue strategy.
Mm-hmm. And as a reminder for folks, what John, what you're doing right now, you're going to look at the market report to develop. What are you doing right now? You're developing a hypothesis about your market. You're kind of checking assumptions you might have about booking patterns. Remind us again where we're at with it, kind of like, why are we here? What are we doing right now?
I'm looking at the market reports, and I'm not looking at it to say like, okay, I need to price at $200. I'm trying to basically write down statements in my head or on a sheet of paper that are like what I'm hypothesizing is going on in the market. And I'm going to use those statements to actually build specific tactics or guidelines that will inform what I do when I'm doing revenue management. This seems like it'll be pretty daunting. The interesting thing is this is not necessarily something you do every day at this level. You do this maybe once a week or check it. You do it once a month, and it gets much faster because once you've already built a basis of what you think is going on, it's much easier to tweak something than to invent it. The last thing I kind of want to show you here is under the historical section, and it's another distribution chart, and it's distribution of lead time. So I'm going to look at March because March is almost over. And it's generally would have been a high season in general historical periods. And what I want to understand here is this curve. So what's interesting to me is a couple points. 30 days and under. Yep.
You're on March 9th, 2019, it looks like.
Oh.
I think you want to be.
Thank you.
There we go.
So 30 days and under. So 50% of our bookings are coming in 30 days and under. That's a pretty important thing to understand, right? Because if we see that there's a big disjunct between nightly rate and an asking rate, we want to try to understand, like, that means it's really competitive in that time frame, and there's still a very wide range of rates being asked for. What also is interesting, though, is between this 30 and 60 day, we also have a really huge chunk. What is that? 60 to 90, like 30% of our bookings are coming in this range. So that means people are booking in advance. And what that would indicate to me is that if you're not booking in advance, you might be overpriced. And we know that people in the market are overpriced right now because we can see that disjunct between just what's actualizing last week versus what's being asked for next week. It's a big difference. So this, to me, is going to help me draw some assumptions. One assumption is that there is opportunity in the 30 to 60 day window if I price right in it. Two, I really need to be competitive within 30 days if I have available inventory, because there's a lot of bookings coming in and there's a lot of differences in prices. So those are a couple things that are going to help me build my strategy. Those reports, I think, are really good to go over. Just to follow up on it, it's the historical nightly rate time series, the future asking rate time series, and the lead time distribution. Combine those with some of the trends to just get an idea of seasonality, and you're going to be able to build a picture of what is going on in a marketplace, and you'll be able to reference that to kind of to guess what's going on. Okay, so let's hop back to our presentation and talk about the next step. We have some assumptions now, and now we want to develop a strategy and establish a plan. So what I've done for you is I have a statement here that I've written. This statement is a way for me to articulate my strategy. What I hope it tells you is I can read this to you, and it gives you a very clear, an idea of what I'm going to do. It doesn't necessarily tell you all the specifics, but if I were to explain what I'm doing to either one of my owners or one of my colleagues or a CEO or anyone who asks a question, they'd get an idea of what I'm doing. And what you will see as we go through this is this statement is actually built off of pieces that I have articulated that are specific and relate to what I'm going to do when I'm revenue managing. And that's how we would like you to think about this. We're talking about this in regards to COVID, but I really encourage people to do this kind of strategy building kind of at all levels. And it's okay to do it at various levels. You may be at a point where really you're at a super high level and your statements are very simple and cover the whole year. But as you do more or want to go deeper or want to build more complexity or have more people that you have to delegate to, you can go deeper and deeper into complexity and keep building off of this strategic kind of structure. So this statement is dropping rates in the short term to drive occupancy, offer a variety of rate positions in the midterm with the goal to react to bookings when a portfolio shows signs of possible sellout, around 60%. And long term, I want to hold out for higher rates depending on the recovery. However, I may position a small portion of the product for early bookers. So I'm mitigating my risk there. So I think that gives you a pretty good idea. If we go here, this is the constituent parts. And these can be very specific. So I have this in this format because it's a nice presentation. I wrote this just in a couple bullet points, so you don't have to have a bunch of blocks to put things in. But the first thing to notice about this strategy that I recommend is I broke this up according to booking windows. You can be flexible on those, and we'll show you another example that's a little bit more specific after this. But the idea is you want to break up, if you were looking at your tape chart, what these time periods are, because you're going to take different actions in the different time periods. So when you're looking at your tape chart, hey, if I'm looking from today till the next week, this is what I'm looking to do. If I'm looking 30 days from now to 60 days from now, this is what I'm looking to do. And within this, I have built a number of what I would call just guidelines. There's strategic sentences that give an idea of how I would approach this. So for example, in the short term, I'm saying I'm going to automate rate drops. That's something we can do in Wheelhouse. In this midterm, I basically am saying I want to increase the rate in response to booking velocity. And I even put a KPI, like any part of my portfolio that's over 60%, I want to put some increases on the rate, a little bit more than maybe what the algorithm is recommending. I want to keep weekdays low. If you organize these kind of strategic statements, you can use them to build your kind of strategic paragraph. And when you're looking at your portfolio, you can reference these to get an idea of what you're going to do. And then you can also use that to tweak your strategy. If you're like, hey, my strategy is to increase these, I really don't think I should be doing that right now because of X or Y. You now are creating this interplay between yourself in the past and yourself in the future. So we got one more example of this strategy. And I think this might be a good opportunity before we dive into this other example. Are there any questions right now or anything we'd like to address on that?
No, I think we've got great questions coming in the chat window. We got teammates answering some things. So I would say keep going. I like the articulation of, hey, have a thesis, write it down. Now you start to develop kind of the right setting. You kind of make adjustments around these statements. I think it's very clear to me. So yeah, continue.
One thing to mention is, so I'm reading you this first because I think in terms of communicating with people, it's the easiest way to approach it. But I actually built this first. I built looking at my market reports, I wrote down individual things that I thought that were happening, or I took, you can see, increase in response to booking velocity. that's very related to like this hunch that we had when we were looking at that distribution report, that people are looking 30 to 60 days out. We just need to do something to capture that. So I wrote something that was specific. I made a specific thing that, as it relates to my portfolio, I set a KPI, and I put it into that midterm, which we'll show you on the next thing is how we define those times. But once I had put together a bunch of these, what I would call tactics, these are the tactics that make up your strategy. I used those tactics to write a paragraph that articulated the strategy as a whole, so that, you know, if Andrew came and he was like, what are you doing for the recovery in Nashville or in whatever city, I'd be able to tell him. And he'd be able to go, okay, I have an idea of what you're doing. So let's go to this. We'll move through this one a little quicker, but we wanted to give you another example that's kind of related to the market data that we looked at. This is one that I wrote for Nashville. Basically, what I've said here is reacting to the booking velocity in the portfolio in the midterm on a weekly basis while peeling back those rate increases within the 30-day window if booking pace stalls. Last minute, I want to automate rate drops, but will manually intervene to keep the rate position high when the portfolio is 80 to 90% booked. We'll segment the long-term position by holding back some inventory at higher rates, offering some inventory below the recommendation to test for demand signals, as well as incentivize some rooms with extra long stay discounts to mitigate the risk of recovery interruption. So, little bit longer statement, but you have a pretty clear idea of the different things that we'd be doing across a whole range of time periods in, you know, 4 sentences. So I think that that would be a pretty good win. If we look at the plan that I've developed here, the first thing you'll notice is I have 4 categories. You can decide how many time period categories you want. There's flexibility there, and I have also defined them. So in this case, I've defined last minute is 0 to 7. I've defined short term as 7 to 30, midterm is 30 to 60, and this is a typo, it should say long term, but that's 60 plus days. And I've put these tactics within them. And in this tactic, you'll see there's a couple things that are even more specific. One, in some cases, I refer to minimum length of stay. This is a increased weekend minimum length to 2 in the very last minute. This is something that would actually not be so much to drive demand, but to protect from last minute booking problems I might have. So those kind of restrictions that you get from owners or that maybe deal with other aspects of your business, they are part of your strategy. Your revenue manager has to make sure that those things are being done. So you can put them in here as tactics. You can see here that this is like a guideline to inform my my intervention. So I'm telling myself that when I'm looking in the 7 to 30-day window, all of those places where I've put rate increases on in the 30 to 60-day window, if they're not still booking, I want to take them off. So I'm reminding myself that's something when I sit down, I need to look for in the 7 to 30-day window is when bookings aren't coming in and I have rate increases. Got to pull them back off. Another thing that you'll see is I labeled here weekly. I think it's really important with certain things to set cadences for yourself. Depending on how much time you have, this might be a daily thing, a weekly thing, a monthly thing, but you can remind yourself. I'm basically saying here, every week, I want to look and see where my bookings are happening in the 30 to 60-day window. And every 10% of my portfolio that gets booked, I'm going to throw an additional 10% increase. I really want to push the rate because we don't know how fast this is going to recover. And I don't know how my portfolio is performing compared to other people's individual portfolios. So you can see there, setting cadences is going to really help. We're already giving ourselves an idea of, if I just pulled this up whenever I was going to do revenue management, I'm telling myself where to look and I'm telling myself what to look for. This last thing in the long term too, these are more like tactics that are guidelines around what I think. So to give you an idea of why I have it this way, it's I don't know how this is going to recover. I want to hold some inventory back in case it really recovers fast. I do want to sell some early to mitigate my risk in case it doesn't recover or there's an interruption to the recovery. So I want to sell that early. And then I may also want to have some long-term stays too. Some of these things where this is telling me how I'll intervene, some of these things are going to tell me how I'm going to automate the system. So like holding back top range of the portfolio via far future adjustments, that's an automation that I am able to set in Wheelhouse. And as if I go back, check my assumptions and change my strategy, changing that tactic would mean I should change my automation. The same is also true in like the automate rate drop. One thing, or not one thing to remember, but I do want to give you an idea that this strategic approach can be done at all levels. Maybe right now it's just, I want to maximize my occupancy. And when, you might start to break that down. What does that mean? What do I need to do that? And you might just build a few tactics under that. Then you can start to split it up over different timeframes as you get more sophisticated, or you have more resources to allocate to this. You can do something with time. You can also go even further. You can segment your portfolio and say, hey, I have a luxury portion of my portfolio. I have, a mid-range version of my portfolio, or I have these really large properties and these really small properties, and you can build additional tactics that only apply to those. And if you start to build these pieces together, you can also put them beyond COVID. And actually, what we had done and what I've advised my clients to do is to kind of build one of these for all of your seasons is at a general level. That way, when you're bringing people on to train them, you're talking to owners, if you're a revenue manager and you have to talk to your executive team about what you're doing, you have a document that you can share with the company to say, this is how we're managing these properties in this time period. And then when something doesn't work, you can go back to the plan and say, what didn't work for us, or how can we improve this? And you tweak that. I think building that structure is a good way to documenting something that most people do intuitively and is really a key aspect to how you scale.
Yeah. John, quick, we have a few folks saying we're moving a little fast. I just want to name for everyone, we will be sharing both the presentation and the video and one other thing with those who have joined us today. So we'll get to that. And John, are you going to show a little bit? Are you going to show a little bit of maybe how you're going to implement this strategy within Wheelhouse?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's actually the next section. So we'll jump into that. This is, keep in mind, this is something that takes practice. And, if you're talking to us and a client of Wheelhouse, we'd love to talk to you because, revenue strategy is what we do. But just start small, keep practicing. But if you start to structure how you're approaching this, I think it'll take something that seems like there's so much information, so much data, and you don't know where to start, and just start to break it into bite-sized pieces that you can approach. So the last step that we have is react and interact. We have a plan. We have an idea of what the market is doing, what we think the market is doing. We have a plan for how we're going to approach it. The next step is let's approach it. So the first thing we got to do is we got to react. And what are we reacting to? We're reacting to bookings in your portfolio. It's great to know what the market's doing, but what is actually going on in your portfolio is going to have a very, very big impact. That's really what you need to know. If the market says it's doing great and it's booked and you're not booked, you need to do something. If you're super booked and the market's not booked, maybe you have an opportunity to optimize that. So the first thing you need to do is understand where your bookings are landing. And there's a couple places that we can go ahead and do that. So if we go to the market reports, one of them that I like to look at just a snapshot is if you go future and go available rooms, this is just giving you an idea of what is available. And what you're looking for is these kind of peaks. Those are dates to watch out for. This isn't going to be moving, so you're just getting a snapshot of kind of the basic future demand, right? And any of these troughs mean there's less rooms available, and those are dates that you want to keep on your radar because they might be high demand. Whether or not you see that in your portfolio will determine what you decide to do.
So just a second, John, if you go back to that for a second. So again, you went to the future tab.
Future tab, market report, future tab, available rooms.
You're looking at available rooms.
And I'm looking at it at the daily level.
You're looking at a daily level. And what this chart is showing you is these dips mean that more inventory has been booked or is offline.
Right.
Yep. And we're seeing something kind of interesting, which is it looks like summer is booking, or at least June is booking faster than spring right now.
It does look like that. Now, what we have to understand about the product too, which we don't know, is how many people only book X number of days in advance. I've talked to a number of clients who have actually closed their calendar in the future because they don't know about the recovery. I think that's kind of a risky situation, honestly. One, you affect how you're going to appear on your OTA channels when you close your inventory, and two, you're assuming that you know what you're going to do when you have the least amount of time to figure it out. So. But keep in mind, some more inventory may show up. I really like to look for these outliers because those inventory closures are going to be automated for most people, and they're going to follow kind of just a basic trend. Where you have these outliers where things really spike is probably a pretty good indicator that people are also purchasing. And all those people who haven't put their product up are missing out on it. So the next thing that you can kind of do, I think many of us are familiar, whether you're on Airbnb, you're using a PMS, or you're using Wheelhouse Pro, which now offers the best version, I think. But scanning the tape chart. We all know, that you pull up the tape chart, you get an idea of where your bookings are, and you can get an idea of where your demand is. If you haven't already signed up for Wheelhouse or are already a client, Wheelhouse released Wheelhouse Pro, which has a calendar view. What I really like about this is the capability to filter this. I think I have some properties in here. So you can see your bookings will show up like you can see here on these little green guys. But what's really great about this is not only can you see where your bookings are showing up, but you can very, very easily make adjustments according to your strategy. Hey, I said I was going to put this up 10% every time I get a booking. It's very, very easy for me to just select them all or do that, to select an individual unit, to see what my rate is. That's always something that's difficult when you're looking at some tape charts, is you can see where the bookings are, but you don't know what the price is currently. Additionally, you also can approach your some of those automations yourself. So I think a lot of us are familiar with looking at the tape chart. If you haven't signed up for Wheelhouse Pro, take a look at this one, because it's a really easy way to combine those activities of changing rates, making those adjustments, making decisions, and also seeing where it's going. The last kind of thing is, some people may be familiar with this. I think a lot of us build our own ways to see data visualization, but using your own reservation data to just get an idea of where your reservations are falling. And I think a lot of people are used to looking at lists of data, and it's really hard to get an idea of, at the same time, of like when a sale is being made and where it's landing, because that's really the most important part to revenue management, is where is that sale occurring. It's not just, people think about pacing, you're like, okay, this week I sold $100,000. Well, did I sell $100,000 for the next week, or did I sell $100,000 for 6 months from now? That's really important to your decision making. So if you have a way like this kind of graph right here to take that reservation data and show you where that revenue is occurring, it's going to tell you when you go to your tape chart or any other tool you're using where I should be focusing, right? So these visualizations are things that, we're kind of experts at understanding the data that's coming through in the space. And if you have some idea of how to do this yourself, you're ahead of the game. If you don't worry. There's resources like, come and talk to us, and we'll see how we can help you do that and integrate with Wheelhouse. The last thing is interact, which means making changes. Once you've referenced your strategy, the goal is you've kind of told yourself how you're going to make changes already. And when you're just making those decisions, you're going to do, you can do them straight on Wheelhouse. If you're using Wheelhouse, which I recommend you do. Very, very easy. There's visualizations so you can see how we're making these changes. All you got to do, select your dates, make your adjustments. Furthermore, if you're operating, I think, so I tend to use this calendar view because I work with clients with quite a bit of units. Not everyone has as many units. So what you can do is you can also look at this, and people may prefer a much more detailed and granular look. You can make those changes straight from here as well. So it kind of has options for people at all levels of the business to be able to operate efficiently and make adjustments and tweak their strategy. If you didn't already know too, Wheelhouse is going to provide you the base rate recommendation, which is really helpful. It cuts a lot of time and efficiency, makes it a lot of efficiency, so you can worry about the 20% that you need to optimize rather than lifting the whole load yourself. I think we've gotten through that pretty quickly. The other thing in terms of interacting that I would like to touch on is part of my strategy involved not just interacting on changing the rates for things I'm looking for, but actually configuring my automations. And I think the automations we really want to talk about as they relate to COVID are a couple of them that are going to be found under the strategy setting of your listings. So The first one is going to be this last minute discount. Last minute discount is an interesting one. I think a lot of people set it and forget it, but especially in places like this, or even as you talk about different seasonalities, this is something that you may want to differentiate. So you have some great preset options which are going to work for you, but you can go ahead and customize these as well and determine what you want to do with your pricing on top of how the algorithm is going to already react. So if you, like we said in Nashville, really wanted to be competitive in the 30-day, like 7 to 30-day window, what I might do is really allow this to drop a little bit faster and a little bit earlier.
And John, let's do this. Why don't we delete all these settings and just show folks, just build it from scratch again for us, just to see,
Sure.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I like to do is I like to look at what one of the presets is. I don't need to reinvent the wheel every time. So if I decide, this is going to start dropping at 15 days and we're going to drop a maximum of 15%, I really think that if I'm not that booked, I really want to compete a little bit faster than that. Maybe I'm going to start this as early as 30. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the date ranges in first so that I can get an idea of kind of what I'm doing. 15, 7, and then I'm going to do something interesting. I recommend people do this, but you don't have to. But I do this for some of my clients. I'm going to put a 2-day or a 1-day one here, and I'll tell you why at the end. So I want this to start dropping maybe a little bit more precipitously. Because I just want to maximize my occupancy. So even if I'm going to leave some money on the table, I want this to be booked. I want to capture more of the market than other people are because I've got rent due on this lease arbitrage property. Now, the one thing I'm going to do on this, I'll tell you why I did this too. So what I did here is, let me back up. I put in the dates, then I put in some of the rates I want to drop. Obviously, this is dropping much more than the preset because I'm starting at 15 and going all the way to 30. I can counter this by setting a minimum price in the strategy as well. So, if you're worried like, hey, I might be telling the system, I just want to take it to the minimum. So I can set the minimum and make sure that it won't go under that. So I can be like, I could even say like, 50 here, but know in my head that I've set the minimum to $100 and it's only going to go to $100. Now, the last thing that I've done on this last day is sometimes I'll just let it kick up because I don't want my lowest price to be the last date. I know that sometimes people book fraudulently. It's really hard to verify people in the last minute. So I don't want to put the lowest price out and attract those people 2 days out. So that's something that I'll do sometimes. Additionally, as you saw in my strategy, I mentioned far future premium. These can be set all at the individual listing level. You can also use the settings calendar to bulk set them across a bunch of rooms. So you don't have to configure each one individually, which is really nice.
John, you want to just show us how you do that across a couple properties at once for
Sure.
far future?
So I went to I went to portfolio, I went to settings, and you can see all my units here. Maybe I don't want to do some of these 2 bedrooms because I want to see if there is demand, so I don't want them to have be kind of priced out. But I want to protect these ones because I have a hunch that the recovery is going to speed up and that we're actually going to have a little bit better price position maybe in the 30 to 60-day window than the 120. Keep in mind, these are assumptions I've made. That's why you got to keep checking them, because if you just leave that and you're wrong, then you might not book anything. But so I might set a custom. This is going to have a really similar time period. Because I'm talking in this recovery range, I'm going to put it out 60 days. And I want to increase the price by 25%. And maybe I'll do 40, oops, sorry. So 60 days, 75%. So we're going really, really high after 60 days. We basically don't want anyone to come in. Then maybe we're going to do within 45 days. I just want it to be a little bit above, right? Because that's kind of in my window. And then And that's all. So now what's going to do is you think about this you have the rate drop option, which is how do you want the system to automate dropping your rate in addition to what the algorithm is recommending. And then the far future premium is what do you want the system to increase automatically outside of a certain range. And these can kind of interact in a different way. So obviously I kept these really close in. You might want to let the algorithm go all the way to 365, but since you don't book more than a year in advance, maybe you put this out at 100%. So if someone does book, they're at least paying so much money that it doesn't matter. You have a lot of flexibility to do that, and I think it's really important when you start articulating your strategy, you'll start to see these automations as also being dynamic options for your strategy. A lot of people just set these and kind of forget them, but there's a lot of opportunity to tweak what you're doing in the automations to maximize your revenue. It's just you have to have a baseline to be able to work from. Otherwise, it's easy to get lost in all the configuration that you have to do.
Great points. A couple quick questions for you. One is, so we've gone to market reports. We've learned about our market. We've developed a strategy to respond, and now you've gone and implemented this strategy. And you've talked a little bit about kind of how often, when you can do this. But for folks who are with us, how often should I be doing this? How often should I be thinking about this? Remind us again of kind of the practice of revenue management, and how do you think about automation versus your customizations? Absolutely.
I think this is a really good question. And I've started, I think we probably should do a whole webinar about how to set up your schedule as a revenue manager. And at the end of the day, it really is going to come down to a couple things. One, how big is your portfolio? Two, what are your goals as a manager? And three, how much resources do you have to allocate? Because you can do this in a number of different ways. If it's you have a ton of properties, you really only can look at this once a month, then you should build a strategy that allows you to that enables you to do that. So you really want to focus on do I have all my automations configured to do what I think is working in the market as best as I can? When I'm going to sit down and look at this once a month, do I know exactly what I'm going to look for? Because I don't have time to just search for the needle in the haystack every time I sit down. Other companies may decide that, we have the resources, or we hired a revenue manager, or we have someone, and now they have a lot of resources allocated. You want to make sure that those resources are being used. So I think it comes down to develop the strategy that takes into account the current resources you have and the size of the portfolio. Now, at a general level, what I would recommend is the market research stuff. I would probably do a deep dive, maybe, once a month. Maybe check it once a week or every couple weeks because of the volatility right now. But those high-level things aren't going to be changing dramatically. They're going to change on a much longer time scale. So that market research, that's a periodic thing you're going to do. Mm-hmm. In terms of developing your strategy and adjusting it, you can do that whenever. You can do that on the same cadence that you're kind of looking at stuff. I would recommend that people at least look at their bookings at a minimum of once a week. If you have a really, really large portfolio, you should probably be looking at revenue management every day, but you may not be looking at every property every day. You know what I mean? So it's really going to depend upon your the resources you can allocate and the size of the portfolio. But I would say that's informed by your strategy. If you build a strategy understanding your resources, you'll know if you're trying to do too much or you're not getting to the things that you think are important.
Yep. And I would stress with Wheelhouse, I think we've always thought that the combination, the best revenue strategies actually emerge from automation, but someone coming in and having an opinion about what they're trying to do with their business, right? We talk to people who have all different types of businesses. Some people want to maximize for occupancy. Someone to take more revenue risk. And what John's doing right here, especially across a portfolio, one of the benefits of having a portfolio is you're able to kind of experiment and learn different things that might drive a new and novel strategy. So, so it sounds like the frequency with which I should look at these are, I can do it as little as kind of once a month. That's okay. I can drive more, and it's a little dependent on what strategy am I trying to execute and how many resources, how much time do I have to do all this.
Yeah, and I would recommend, if you haven't, if you don't know where you kind of sit in the marketplace, or you're really new,
Mhm.
sign up for Wheelhouse, link your listings, and that right there is going to give you an opportunity. The system is going to be able to tell you what we think the kind of base rates in the market are right now, and you can compare that to what you're doing, and you can decide like, oh, I really should spend some more time on this because there's a big difference here, or I'm pretty dialed in. How is this going to help me optimize? What can I do to get to the top 10% of the market?
Yep. And some of the settings we weren't able to cover today included, you can come in and customize your weekend settings. You can come in and customize any month. So kind of the base rate at any month. And Wheelhouse will dynamically price above your settings or adjust above your settings, but you can come in and modify the machine, right? What John did today was he modified the machine. So even at that, John, there's, I'm sure some folks today are thinking like, wow, this is a lot. This is a lot. What is the one thing that you would recommend people focus on, especially during the recovery, to drive performance? What's the one area people should be focused on?
I would say make a consistent habit of checking where your bookings are falling and making a decision if you want to adjust it in your portfolio.
And if you had to think about making those adjustments in the last minute, the near term, medium term, long term, where are you spending most of your energy right now?
So I think most people spend most of their energy in the short term, but I personally believe that's where you have the least impact. I think you should automate that and focus on the 30 to 60 day, maybe the 45 to 60, 15 to 45. But that time frame that we saw where there's like 30% of bookings in, but most people aren't pricing anywhere close, like that's where the opportunity is, right? Because if rates are just eroding, then you're competing for the bottom. What you want to compete is for those people who are planning in advance, and you're now positioning against people who are overpriced. So you can probably price above what the price is going to be a week before or 2 weeks before, but you got to find it, right? You got to find the price. So you need to spend some time experimenting there.
Yeah. And once again, walk us through a little bit. So we have people from markets all over the world right now. How can I know if I'm in Wales or Paris or Dubai? Where can I go on Wheelhouse again to figure out, is my market recovering?
Absolutely. So if we talked about some markets that I know pretty well as examples, but really where we want to start is this market reports and just get a top level idea. I mean, what's Dubai?
Sure.
Go ahead and take a look at these market reports. If you're not too familiar with the data yet, start with the trends. The trends give you a good idea. You can see when you look at these different years what has happened in the past and what's kind of happening now. And if you compare, 2019, 2020, 21, you can start to build an idea of what is going on in the marketplace, and then start to look deeper at some of the things that we were talking about, right? So I would say start with the market reports, get an idea of what's going on in the market. Another thing you should do is check your restrictions. Restrictions are serious, and they're going to affect what's going on in the marketplace. I mean, we don't have a lot of restrictions now, but if we suddenly get a bunch of restrictions later in the summer, you're going to have to change your strategy, right?
Brisbane went offline for a couple of days. France went back into a shutdown. So yes, all this stuff can change quickly. Of course, that's what's going to make this year so interesting. And again, why hopefully some of this data on the market reports, again, they're free. They're in every market. People have asked about Oxford and Swansea and other places. We're probably in most of those markets, to be honest. So please do check us out. If you go to that page, John, can you go back to that markets page for a second? So if you go to Wheelhouse, all the way to the right on your tabs, on these, if you click markets, so if you just go to usewheelhouse.com/markets, we not only have a list of the general markets we're in, but you can type in your specific city, and we do have broad and increasing coverage. So please do check it out. We'd obviously love to be able to help. John, final words of wisdom. We got 1 minute to go.
Build a plan and talk to us. Reach out if you haven't talked to us yet. And if you have talked to us, reach out.
Build a plan. No, I love that. I love that. Thank you. I think the the act of writing down the strategy is such good evidence that you've gone and you've looked at the data, you've formed an opinion, you're going to be so far ahead of the curve in terms of what you're doing against other people in the market. And of course, like the data doesn't lie, right? We get to see, the benefit of a tool like Wheelhouse is you can greatly expand the amount of research you're able to do to have a truly informed opinion. Thank you all for joining us today. John, thank you so much for putting this presentation together. We will be sharing the presentation. We will be sharing the video. If you do want to see a visualization of kind of where bookings are landing and therefore how you can maybe adjust your unique portfolio, do reach out because we do have some other tools to help. But otherwise, it sounds like we need to go look at the data, write down our strategy, execute against it. Is that fair?
It's fair.
Excellent. All right. Thanks all. Really appreciate it. Thanks for joining from all over the world in the evening, in the early morning, whatever it may be. We're going to keep doing these. So if you have any ideas about how we can make this better, if we can slow down, cover more materials, cover your market, please do reach out to us. We're really easy to reach. If you want to talk about what we learned today, you can email us discover@usewheelhouse.com. If you come to usewheelhouse.com, we have 24/7 chat, so you can come and ping us at any time and ask any questions. But thank you all so much for making time this morning. John, be well, bud. Talk more soon, and we'll take it from there. See you all.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
All right.